"Cowboy, every time I bend over, your eyes are under my skirt," she said. "Don't deny it." It was a place where days blended together, and yet every small moment could feel heavy if you let it. He had earned the name the Cowboy without trying. He was not loud or showy. He showed up on time, did his share, and rarely complained. His boots were worn but clean. His hat had been fixed more times than replaced. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words were short and clear. People trusted him because he was steady. They also watched him because he noticed things others missed. She arrived later than most. Not late to work, just later to the ranch. She had experience, confidence, and a sharp way of speaking that made people pause. She worked hard, but she also laughed easily. She didn't hide who she was, and she didn't soften herself to make others comfortable. Some admired that. Others didn't know what to do with it. From the first week, their paths crossed often. The ranch was not a big place, and tasks overlapped. Feeding, fixing, cleaning, lifting, jobs that required people to work close to one another. At first, their exchanges were normal, simple greetings. Short questions, quiet nods, nothing special. But over time, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It never is at first. It started with awareness. He noticed her presence before he saw her, the sound of her steps, the way she moved with confidence like she belonged anywhere she stood. She noticed his focus, the way he paid attention even when pretending not to. It felt like being seen, not loudly but clearly. The days were long. Heat pressed down by noon and everyone moved slower. Sweat and dust made people less careful with their thoughts. Words slipped out more easily. Jokes lasted longer than they should. The line between work and personal space blurred just enough to cause confusion. She spoke freely. Sometimes too freely, people said. She joked, teased, and made comments that made others laugh or look away. She didn't mean harm. She enjoyed the energy of conversation. But she also liked testing reactions, seeing who stayed calm and who didn't. He stayed calm, at least on the outside. He kept his eyes on his work. He answered when needed. He didn't join the jokes, but he didn't shut them down either. That silence made people curious. Silence often does. There were moments when he caught himself looking longer than necessary. Not staring, not obvious, just noticing. A movement, a sound, a presence. He told himself it was normal. People notice people. It meant nothing. He believed that or wanted to. She noticed the pauses. She noticed when his attention shifted, even slightly. She noticed because she was used to being noticed and because she was good at reading rooms. It didn't make her uncomfortable at first. It made her aware. Awareness can feel like power or pressure depending on the moment. The ranch had its own rhythm. Morning work, short breaks, afternoon heat, evening quiet. During breaks, people gathered in shade, drank water, shared stories. He usually stood a little apart, listening. She often leaned against something, talking with her hands, drawing attention without trying. When she laughed, it carried. When she stopped talking, people felt it. He noticed those changes too, and that bothered him. He didn't like being pulled by someone else's mood. He valued control over his work, over himself. Still, control doesn't mean blindness, and he wasn't blind. One afternoon, they were assigned to the same task. Nothing unusual, just work that required two sets of hands. They didn't talk much. The heat was strong and both focused on finishing. At one point, she said something light, almost careless. He replied with a short answer. Their eyes met briefly. Not long enough to be clear, not short enough to be nothing. That moment stayed with him longer than it should have. He told himself it was just tiredness, the heat, the long hours. The mind looks for distraction when the body is worn down. He drank water, wiped his face, and went back to work. Still, the feeling remained, quiet but present. She walked away first. He watched her go, then stopped himself. He didn't like that he had to stop himself. It made him question his own honesty. Around the ranch, people talked. Not about them directly, but about everything. Who worked hard, who didn't, who joked too much, who kept to themselves. Stories grew without effort. He knew how fast words could turn into something else. He had seen it before. That knowledge made him careful. She knew it too in her own way. She had learned how quickly confidence could be misunderstood, how attention could shift from harmless to heavy. She chose not to hide, but she stayed aware. Awareness was her way of staying in control. Their interaction stayed small, but the space between them felt charged. A step closer than needed. A pause before speaking. A glance that meant nothing and everything at once. No rules were broken. No words crossed lines, but the feeling of a line being tested hung in the air. At night, when the ranch settled, he lay awake longer than usual. He replayed moments he shouldn't remember so clearly. He told himself to let it go. Tomorrow would be another long day. Work would demand focus. Feelings would fade. They always did. She too thought about the day, not with regret but with curiosity. She wondered what people saw when they looked at her, what he saw. She wondered if she had imagined the tension or if it was real. She didn't mind attention, but she respected clarity. Unspoken things made her uneasy. Morning came again. Dust, boots, work. Everything looked the same but felt slightly different. They greeted each other as usual. No change in tone. No sign of what sat beneath the surface. Yet both knew something had begun, even if neither could name it. Not a story, not a mistake, not a promise. Just a quiet awareness that would not leave easily. And that was how it started. Not with a bold move or clear words, but with small moments stacking on top of each other. With glances that lingered a second too long. With silence that spoke louder than sound. On a ranch where space was wide and freedom felt endless, two people began to realize how close they truly were, and how careful they would need to be from that point on. The next few days felt heavier than before, even though nothing obvious had changed. Work continued as usual. The same chores, the same heat, the same dust settling on skin and clothes, but both of them felt the difference. It was like walking into a room where someone had just finished speaking. The words were gone, but the meaning was still hanging in the air. He tried to keep his focus sharp. He woke earlier, worked harder, and kept his thoughts on the task in front of him. He told himself discipline was the answer. If he stayed busy, his mind would not wander. If he stayed quiet, nothing could be misunderstood. That had always worked for him before. She noticed the change almost immediately. He spoke less, moved faster, and avoided standing too close. It was not rude, just careful. Too careful. She wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or challenged. She didn't like guessing games, and she didn't like silence when something needed to be said. The ranch had a way of forcing moments. Paths crossed whether people wanted them to or not. One afternoon, the sun was high and unforgiving. Everyone moved slower, patience thinner than usual. They ended up working in the same area again, not by choice but by necessity. At first, they worked quietly. The sound of tools, the shift of boots on dry ground, the wind moving through open land. He kept his eyes on his hands. She worked nearby, aware of him without looking directly. The space between them felt smaller than it was. Then she spoke. Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It carried a tone that made him pause before he could stop himself. It wasn't a joke exactly, but it wasn't fully serious either. It was balanced right in between where truth often hides. She made a comment about his attention, about his eyes, about moments she said she had noticed. She said it casually, like she was pointing out the weather. But the words landed hard. Time slowed for him. He felt heat rise to his face, not from the sun. His first reaction was denial, immediate and firm. He told her she was mistaken, that he was focused on work, that he didn't look at people like that. His voice was steady, but his chest felt tight. She watched him carefully as he spoke, not accusing, not smiling, just watching. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, she tilted her head slightly as if weighing his words. Then she said she wasn't accusing him of anything. She just wanted honesty. That word stayed with him. Honesty. He didn't know how to respond to that without opening a door he wanted closed. He repeated that he respected her and the work, that he didn't want trouble, that things should stay professional. The words sounded right, but even as he said them, he wondered if they sounded complete. She didn't push further. She nodded slowly and said she understood. Her tone was calm, but something in her expression changed. Not anger, not disappointment, something quieter, awareness maybe, or distance. They went back to work, but the rhythm was broken. Every movement felt watched, even when it was. Every step felt louder. He kept his focus sharp, almost too sharp. He refused to let his eyes wander, even naturally. The effort made him tense. She worked with the same confidence as always, but her words were fewer. The ease that had once filled her voice was gone. She wasn't cold, just controlled. That change affected him more than her comment had. The rest of the day passed slowly. When work finally ended, he felt relief mixed with unease. He hadn't done anything wrong, he told himself. He had spoken clearly. He had set boundaries. That should have been enough. But that night, sleep didn't come easily. He replayed the moment again and again. Her tone, his response, what he had said and what he had not. He asked himself hard questions. Had he been careless? Had his silence given the wrong impression? Had he noticed more than he should have? He didn't like uncertainty. He liked clear lines and firm ground. This felt like standing on something that could shift without warning. She, too, replayed the moment. She lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling. She hadn't meant to start something. She had only wanted to address what she felt. Living with unspoken tension made her uncomfortable. She believed in facing things directly. His denial didn't upset her, but it made her think. She wondered whether people always knew their own behavior, whether noticing something meant intending something. She didn't feel offended. She felt thoughtful. The next morning, both arrived to work with guarded calm. Their greeting was polite and brief. Others noticed nothing unusual. That was the nature of such moments. They lived quietly between people, invisible to everyone else. Days passed. The ranch returned to its steady rhythm. He kept his distance, careful and respectful. She matched that energy. Their conversation stayed short and necessary. No jokes, no teasing, no pauses that lingered too long. Yet the silence between them felt louder than before. He caught himself wanting to explain, even though he wasn't sure what he would explain. That he hadn't meant to make her uncomfortable. That he valued respect more than anything. But explanations can also reopen things, and he wasn't sure that was wise. She noticed his restraint and understood it in her own way. She respected the effort. But part of her wished for clarity that didn't rely on silence. She believed silence often left too much room for doubt. One afternoon, they crossed paths unexpectedly. No task assigned, no reason to stop. Just a moment where neither could avoid the other without making it obvious. They exchanged a few words about work. Simple, neutral. Before they parted, she said something small but meaningful. She said she appreciated professionalism, that she valued clear behavior. It wasn't an accusation or a warning. It was a statement. He nodded and agreed. He meant it. After that, something settled between them, not comfort but understanding. The tension didn't disappear, but it changed shape. It became quieter, more controlled, like a river guided by its banks. He felt a sense of responsibility. Not just to her, but to himself. He wanted his actions to match his values. He wanted no confusion, no regret. He knew how quickly things could go wrong when people ignored small moments. She felt a sense of relief. She had spoken her truth. She had set her boundary. Whatever happened next would be shaped by choice, not confusion. Still, awareness remained. It always would. Awareness doesn't vanish just because people decide to behave carefully. It simply waits, reminding them of how close lines can be and how easily crossed if not respected. By the end of that week, both understood something important. Moments matter. Words matter. And sometimes the most powerful changes happen not through action but through restraint. What had been said could not be unsaid. What had been noticed could not be unseen. But what came next was still in their control. And that understanding marked the true turning point, quiet and unseen by others but deeply felt by both. After that turning point, the ranch felt different to both of them, even though nothing on the surface had changed. The same fences stood in the same places. The same tools were used every day. The same people moved around, busy with their own lives. Yet for him and her, the air carried a quiet weight that followed them from morning to night. He became more aware of himself than ever before. Every movement felt measured. Every glance was checked before it could fully form. He told himself this was good. Awareness meant control. Control meant safety. Still, the effort was tiring. He had never needed to think this hard about simply existing near someone. During work, he stayed focused, sometimes too focused. He volunteered for tasks that kept him alone or far from others. He spoke only when necessary. People noticed his seriousness and assumed he was just in one of his quiet phases. No one questioned it. That was how he had always been, after all. Inside, though, his thoughts were restless. He asked himself questions he didn't enjoy. Why had her words stayed with him? Why had he felt the need to deny so quickly? Was denial a sign of innocence or fear of being seen too clearly? He didn't like how complicated things felt. He preferred simple truths. At night, when the ranch finally went still, his mind grew louder. He replayed small moments from the past weeks. Not dramatic scenes, just ordinary ones that now felt important. A shared task, a brief pause, a look that lasted just long enough to be remembered. He wondered if he had been careless without realizing it. He also thought about respect. Respect was a value he held tightly. He didn't want to be someone who made others uncomfortable, even unintentionally. The idea bothered him deeply. It pushed him to stay distant, even when distance felt unnatural. She noticed his withdrawal, even when he tried to hide it. She noticed because she was observant by nature. She read changes in tone, posture, and silence the way others read words. She could tell he was trying to do the right thing, and that mattered to her. Still, she felt the distance. It wasn't painful, but it was noticeable. She missed the easy flow of work before everything became careful. She didn't regret speaking up. She believed honesty was necessary, but honesty often came with consequences, and this was one of them. She spent more time with others now, filling the quiet with conversation and movement. She laughed, shared stories, and stayed busy. From the outside, she looked the same as always, confident, strong, at ease. But inside, she was thinking too. She asked herself why she had said what she did. Was it only about setting a boundary, or was there curiosity beneath it? She didn't like unanswered questions, especially about herself. She believed people should understand their own actions before questioning others. She didn't feel blame toward him. She believed that noticing did not always mean intending harm, but she also believed that awareness carried responsibility. That was why she had spoken. Silence in her experience allowed too much room for misunderstanding. As days passed, both settled into this new normal. It wasn't comfortable, but it was stable. They worked near each other without tension showing on the surface. Their conversations stayed polite and brief. No one else sensed anything unusual, yet small moments still tested them. Sometimes they ended up in the same space unexpectedly, a narrow path, a shared tool, a task that required brief coordination. In those moments, both felt the familiar awareness return, not strong, not overwhelming, just present, like a quiet reminder. He kept his eyes steady and his movements clear. He made sure there was nothing that could be misunderstood. That effort gave him a sense of relief, but also a strange sadness. He wondered if being careful meant giving up something unnamed but real. She noticed his consistency and respected it. She could see he was trying. That softened her thoughts toward him. Still, she wondered if this careful distance was the only option, or if clarity could exist without silence. One afternoon, a small mistake happened during work. Nothing serious, just a task done incorrectly. It required a quick discussion to fix. They spoke calmly, focusing only on the problem. Their teamwork felt natural again for a brief moment. That moment stayed with both of them. For him, it was a reminder that cooperation didn't have to carry weight. That things could be simple if he allowed them to be. For her, it was proof that professionalism didn't require emotional distance, only mutual respect. Afterward, he felt conflicted. Part of him wanted to keep things strictly controlled. Another part wondered if he was being too hard on himself. He hadn't acted wrongly. He had responded responsibly. Maybe he deserved some ease. She felt a similar conflict. She valued boundaries, but she also valued openness. She didn't want her words to become walls. She wanted understanding, not separation. That evening, both found themselves reflecting more deeply than before. He thought about his past, about how he had learned to stay quiet and observant. Silence had protected him before. It had kept him out of trouble. But silence could also hide things that needed light. He wondered where the balance lay. She thought about her past too, about moments when she had stayed quiet and regretted it, about times when speaking up had changed things, not always for the better but for the clearer. She believed clarity was worth discomfort. The following days continued in this thoughtful rhythm. Nothing dramatic happened, no big conversations, no sudden changes, just steady time passing, shaping thoughts slowly. People often think important moments are loud and obvious, but sometimes they are quiet and internal. This was one of those times. He began to accept that awareness did not have to be an enemy. It could be a guide. He could notice and still choose correctly. He didn't need to erase his thoughts, only manage his actions. That realization brought him a small sense of peace. She began to accept that not every truth needed to be revisited. She had spoken once, clearly and calmly. That was enough. The rest depended on choices made afterward. Watching those choices mattered more than repeating words. Gradually, the tension softened. Not because it disappeared, but because it was understood. Like a tool that had been handled carefully enough to no longer feel dangerous. Their interactions grew slightly easier, still respectful, still measured, but no longer heavy with uncertainty. A nod here, a short exchange there, nothing extra, nothing missing. Both learned something important during this time. That self-reflection could be uncomfortable but valuable. That restraint could be powerful when guided by respect, not fear. And that moments of awareness, if handled wisely, could lead to growth instead of regret. By the end of this part of their journey, neither felt confused anymore. They didn't know exactly what the future held, but they understood the present better. They had faced a quiet challenge without letting it turn into something harmful. They had chosen thoughtfulness over impulse, and in doing so, they had protected not just their work, but their sense of self. The ranch continued its steady rhythm, unaware of the inner work being done within two people who walked its land every day. But for them, this period marked a deep shift. Not one others could see, but one they would both carry forward, shaping whatever came next. Time moved forward, steady and quiet, just like the ranch itself. Days passed, then weeks. The season slowly began to change, and with it, the feeling between them settled into something calmer. Not forgotten, not erased, but understood. What once felt heavy now felt managed, like a weight that had been lifted just enough to breathe freely. He no longer woke with a tight feeling in his chest. His thoughts were clearer. He had come to accept that noticing was human, but choice was what defined a person. He had made his choice clear through his actions, day after day. Respect was no longer something he worried about proving. It was simply how he lived. At work, he returned to his natural rhythm. Focused, steady, dependable. He didn't avoid tasks that brought him near others anymore, but he didn't seek closeness either. He trusted himself again. That trust made a quiet difference in how he carried himself. Others noticed the change, though they couldn't name it. He seemed lighter, more at ease. Still quiet, still reserved, but no longer tense. He laughed once or twice at small jokes, nothing big, just enough to show he was present. She noticed too. She saw how his behavior stayed consistent, not forced. That consistency mattered to her more than words ever could. It told her everything she needed to know. He had heard her. He had respected what she said. And he had acted accordingly without making it a big issue. That brought her a sense of peace. She no longer felt the need to stay alert around him. She trusted the space they shared. Trust made things easier. It allowed her to relax into her work again, to move freely without overthinking every step. Their interactions slowly found a natural balance. Still professional, still careful, but no longer distant. They spoke when needed. Sometimes they exchanged brief comments about work. Sometimes they shared silence without discomfort. One evening, as the sun lowered and the sky softened, they worked nearby again. Not assigned together, just close enough to notice each other's presence. The light was gentle, the air cooler than it had been in weeks. At one point she asked him a simple question about a task. He answered clearly. Then, without thinking too much, he added a small suggestion that made the work easier. She thanked him. Their exchange was calm and normal. That moment felt important, even though it looked ordinary. It showed them both that things didn't have to stay frozen in caution. That maturity allowed movement without risk. That respect could exist alongside ease. Later, as they finished for the day, they walked in the same direction for a short distance. No rush, no pressure, just two people heading back after a long day. She spoke first. She said she appreciated how things had been handled. Not just recently, but from the beginning. Her words were simple, honest, and calm. She said it mattered to her that respect had been shown through actions, not explanations. He listened carefully. When she finished, he nodded and said he was glad they understood each other. He said he valued the work environment and the people in it. He said clarity mattered. That was all. No long conversation followed. None was needed. They parted ways with a shared sense of closure. From that point on, the situation no longer lived between them. It became something that had happened, something they had learned from, and something they had moved past. Life on the ranch continued as always. New tasks, new challenges, new routines. The land didn't pause for personal moments, and neither did the work. But both of them carried forward what they had learned. He carried a deeper understanding of awareness and responsibility. He understood now that being observant came with the duty to be intentional. That self-control was not about denial, but about choice. He felt proud of how he had handled things. Not because anyone praised him, but because he knew he had acted in line with his values. That quiet pride stayed with him. She carried a renewed trust in her voice. She had spoken when something felt unclear, and she had done so without anger or blame. That took strength. Seeing that her words had been respected reinforced her belief in honest communication. She also learned that not every moment needed to grow into something more. Some moments existed only to teach, then pass. Their story never became gossip. No rumors spread. No drama followed. That in itself felt like a success. Sometimes, when working in the open land, they would catch sight of each other across a distance. A brief nod, a shared understanding. Then back to work. Simple, clean, respectful. As time went on, new people arrived at the ranch. New personalities, new energy. The environment shifted naturally. What once felt important faded into the background, replaced by the present. Yet the impact remained. Both had grown, quietly and privately. They learned that boundaries were not walls meant to divide, but lines meant to guide. That speaking up could prevent harm when done with care. That restraint was not weakness, but strength. Most importantly, they learned that respect was not a single action, but a series of choices made consistently over time. The ranch remained what it had always been. Wide land, hard work, long days, but for them, it had also been a place of learning. Not every meaningful story ends with loud emotion or dramatic change. Some end with understanding, with balance, with people walking forward a little wiser than before. This was one of those stories. It ended not with distance or closeness, but with clarity. And sometimes, clarity is the most powerful ending of all.